From Ethan Hunt to Junie Cortez, we've seen Spies take on the big screen for a long time now.
And I mean all the cool gadgets, cool cars, and bow ties and Spies. Hello, it's exciting!
Right? Welcome back, Bumblebee family. I'm Taylor McWaters.
And I'm Rachel Fisher, and today we are doing our top 10 real spies that put James Bond to shame.
Kicking off the list at number 10, Eddie Chapman. Born in England back in 1914, Eddie Chapman, codenamed Zigzag, nice, began his British Army days just as a wee teenager. It didn't last too long as he started to turn to crime. Now eventually, he got quite good at breaking open a safe. Already this sounds pretty badass. Eventually he was caught and arrested, so come 1939, Eddie was sent to prison. He was held on the island of Jersey while Germans were taking over. He was released in 1941 and initially he wanted to spy for the Germans, but hear me out, it gets more positive rather. Come 1942, he was on a secret mission to blow up an aircraft factory in North London, but when the time came, he switched sides and joined the MI5. The British ended up faking that attack on the factory, so Eddie was given a medal by Germans for his bravery. On the next parachute mission, there was more than one, Eddie successfully misled Germans to attack the wrong area, saving hundreds of lives. Once the war ended, Eddie Chapman ran his own health spa while smuggling gold on the side. What a champ.
Number 9, Krystyna Skarbek. Where Mr. Bond left damsels and femme fatale heartbroken in his wake, Skarbek left a string of doting men in hers. Dubbed as Churchill's favorite spy, Krystyna Skarbek was the daughter of Polish aristocracy with talents for shooting and horsemanship taught to her by her loving father. Soon she put those sharpshooting skills to use by spying all over Europe. She went to the British Secret Service with a plan to ski into German World War II soldier-occupied Poland and deliver British propaganda. This would help fuel the resistance, especially since the Polish government had fled. With her mother being Jewish and her love for Poland, this was personal. Dozens of times she evaded capture using her wits, charm, and once even bit her own tongue bloody to fake TB. She even saved one of her lovers from prison in true romantic fashion. She sang their favorite tune until he sang it back to identify his location, then tricked the guards into thinking she was related to a British diplomat and said the only way they received mercy would be to release the prisoners. They agreed, especially since the Allies just landed in Poland. Sadly, an obsessed admirer took her life violently, but her service would never be forgotten.
Number 8, Sir Francis Walsingham. Turning back the clocks to the late 1500s, this spy just happened to be the spy master for Queen Elizabeth I. Now at this time, Queen Elizabeth was worried of a Catholic uprising, so it was this man, Sir Francis Walsingham, who recruited help to avoid such a thing. He got informers, seal breakers, anybody who would protect the crown essentially to be on board. He was a successful spy master between 1573 and 1590, but in 1588, that's when the Spanish Armada attacked England, and just a year earlier, Mary Queen of Scots was executed. So yeah, he saw some basically. He was of course a staple in MI5 history. The rose that he would use to press into his seal is on the MI5 coat of arms. Pretty big deal. He was good at his job. He successfully thwarted a number of plans, like the Throckmorton plan in November 1583 for example. When Francis Throckmorton was found with incriminating evidence like invasion plans, maps, name of Catholic supporters, but thanks to Walsingham, he spilled his secrets and the plans for the Spanish and French troops to storm England. Saved the day quite a bit. Great tip. Another plot he foiled was the Babington plot. Anthony Babington was planning to assassinate the Queen alongside his accomplice John Ballard. Now using double agents, Walsingham uncovered this plan. This guy saved the day like 17 times.
Number 7, Sidney Reilly. The life of Sidney Reilly is a Bond movie in and of itself. Born in Odessa, Russia as the son of a Jewish landowner, Sigmund was brilliant from the get-go. He was a self-taught linguist and eventually learned how to speak over 7 languages. At 19, he stowed away on a ship to Brazil and took on a series of Joe jobs. Then one day, the British explorers he was cooking for got attacked by cannibals and he fended them all off. They then turned to him and said, "Have you ever considered the Secret Service?" After espionage training, he was sent back to Russia to collect information. He quickly became known as the Ace of Spies among his enemies and among the ladies. Some say it was even his suave reputation that inspired Mr. Bond. In 1905, he disguised himself as a priest on the French Riviera, tricked a Persian oil concession holder into selling oil to Britain, which benefited Britain's future energy supplies. Sadly, Reilly met his match at last in his home of Russia in 1925 when he was finally caught and and sadly executed.
Number 6. Dusko Popov. During World War II, Dusan Popov, aka Dusko, was a secret agent for the MI6. The Serbian-born spy is one of the inspirations for James Bond. Dusko was an exceptional spy. He uncovered something that could have, well, rather should have, changed the course of history. In 1941, Dusko discovered that the Japanese were planning a major assault on the Americans on Pearl Harbor. That's pretty huge. Now you're thinking to yourself, okay, if you found out they were going to attack, how did it still end up happening? Well, 4 months beforehand, around August, Dusko brought forth his claim and he told them all the information that he got. Thing is, Edgar Hoover, the FBI's director at the time, didn't trust this spy. You can't trust a spy, you can't really blame him either, but now in hindsight it's like, you should have. He wasn't a fan of British intelligence operating in the States, plus in James Bond fashion, Dusko was also a playboy and Hoover wasn't a fan of that lifestyle. So Dusko went on to work alongside Ian Fleming, naval intelligence officer, but we'll get into him a little later on.
Number 5, Nancy Wake. What a lady. This woman is just ridiculous, and it brings me a weird kind of joy. Eccentric and dripping in champagne, Nancy went from living the lavish lifestyle to taking out enemies with her bare hands. One of her partners once said that she was, and I quote, "the most feminine woman I know until the fighting starts, and then she's like 5 men." Unquote. Originally from New Zealand, Nancy married a wealthy man in Marseille and was content to live out her days in luxury, but then the war started. Financed by Henry, she ran an underground railway to help political prisoners and allies escape. She soon became known as the White Mouse by enemies, with a price of 5 million francs on her head. She was captured, then escaped, then returned to England, then jumped straight back into France. She became a guerrilla army member who soon began leading over 7,000 fighters to coordinate airdrops of weapons, explosives, and supplies. Sadly though, her husband was killed while he was searching for her, leading her to escape to London. She lived there until she was 98 and had her ashes scattered over the fields of her greatest battles.
Number 4. Pearl Witherington. Codenames Marie and Polly, Witherington was active during the war and she jumped into the battle to help France combat against the Germans, and she did so by smuggling weapons into France around 1943. Now she trained to become a special ops executive and got a promotion after her superior was arrested, but it wasn't an easy start for Pearl. She had to lead a 14-hour fight against the Germans. She led these troops into battle and subsequently 18,000 Germans surrendered. She was a powerful asset in the 40s, so much so that Germans offered $1 million for her death. Thing is, that check was never cashed because Pearl lived to be the age of 93.
Number 3, Odette Sansom. Dude, wow. This woman endured 10 to 14 torment sessions in a German World War II concentration camp and didn't say a word. By the time she was rescued in 1945, when the Ravensbrück camp was evacuated, her back was broken, she'd been starved, beaten, burned, and more, but the only thing she said to her interrogators was, "I have nothing to say." Badass! She was 28 and a mother of 3 when she became a spy. I'm 27. I'm not saying I want to go through that at all, but what a freaking life, man. Holy goddess. While they were trying to get information out of her, she gathered information that later convicted Ravensbrück commander Fritz Sören as well as other SS officers of war crimes. It all started when the British War Office called on the Somerset homemaker to give the photos of the French coastline that she had from her childhood. She was born in France and had lost her father in World War I. Her husband was already away fighting, and with the Germans taking over her homeland, she painfully decided to leave her children behind and went to save the world. And that she did.
Number 2. Vera Atkins. Though Ian never released or confirmed her identity, it's widely believed that Vera Atkins was the inspiration behind Moneypenny in the Bond novels. Vera Atkins was badass. She was born in Romania and moved to London in 1933. She passed when she was 92 years old, and during World War II, she would recruit and train British secret agents. Those are the same secret agents who parachuted into France to fight the Germans. She was running the whole show. The name M comes from Colonel Maurice Buckmaster, Director of Special Operations. Vera was his assistant. So she loved watching over these 400 secret agents, and when it came to after the war, Vera Atkins felt that it was her duty to investigate the 118 missing agents at that point. She followed breadcrumbs to all of these cases, and of course they had sadly passed during the war, but Atkins was determined to bring their killers to war crime trials. The 118 118th had been carrying millions. He was a gambler, he had millions of service money, so she traced down everybody. She said she realistically was the only one who could do it. It was her duty. As you know, you have to know every move and every detail and every hair on these agents' heads in order to successfully track them down, which she did. And also, she lived a full life. How amazing is that?
And number 1, last but not least, Ian Fleming himself. We have to talk about the man himself, the voice behind James Bond, Ian Fleming. After all, truth is stranger than fiction, as we know from this list. Fleming didn't start out anything like his suave, debonair super spy lead. He was the floundering middle child working as a journalist with a tremendously successful elder brother outshining him. But then, the war changed everything. In May 1939, he was recruited by the Director of Naval Intelligence, John Godfrey, to work as his personal assistant. He was quickly promoted to Lieutenant Commander and put his travels as a journalist to good use. Godfrey used Fleming as a liaison between MI6 and the Special Operations Unit, of which his brother, Peter, became a member, giving Fleming extra access to the British intelligence service. It was game on from there. A fellow naval officer had this to say about Fleming. Fleming is charming to be with, but would sell his own grandmother. I like him a lot. End quote. Obviously, not far from Mr. Bond himself, Fleming suddenly became one of the key members of one of the oldest intelligence agencies in the world. He had an expert eye for analysis and planning. His friend Max Hastings said he was a skilled fixer and a vigorous showman and a giant among name droppers. Unquote. He aided hundreds of spies in the war, being one himself, as well as he developed a special group called Target Force. Soon after his duties were complete, Fleming was determined to write a spy novel heavily inspired by his experiences. Now, I wonder what that one was called. There is so much more to say, but I'm afraid that's it for today.
But if you want a part 2, which you totally do, smash that like button, yell at us for more, and we'll do it, maybe, hopefully, definitely. Comment down below.
Spies. And don't forget to subscribe to stay part of the Hive. I've been your host, Rachel Fisher.
And I'm Taylor McWaters, and we'll see you next time on Bumblebee.
Stay sweet, peas.